Hello and welcome to Native American Bank's 20th anniversary virtual panel. We will start with some housekeeping items for our attendees. This webinar is being recorded, and at any time during this discussion, please use the Q&A option to ask questions to the panelists. Those questions will be posed to our moderator and panelists at the end of their discussion. Now I will hand it over to our moderator, Mr. Tom Ogaard.
Thank you, Veronica, and hello everyone, and welcome to the webinar. We are going to spend the next hour having a conversation related to Native American Bank, which is celebrating its 20th anniversary. My name is Tom Ogaard, and I am the President and CEO of Native American Bank, and I'll be your moderator. I want to take this moment to thank Veronica Lane, Wes Walters, and Amber May from our team here at the bank for their time and effort to put this webinar together. Joining me today are three distinguished leaders in Indian country who are also members of our bank and holding company boards of directors. Cristina Danforth is currently the treasurer of the United Tribe in Wisconsin. She is also the president of the board for the Native American Finance Officers Association. Lance Morgan is well known as an attorney and is a partner in Big Fire Law and Policy Group, LLP. He is also president and CEO of Ho-Chunk Inc., a highly successful Section 17 corporation for the Winnebago tribe in Nebraska, which has a number of subsidiaries. And finally, Derrick Watchman is owner and president of Sagebrush Hill Group, which is a finance, banking, economic development, and gaming advisory acquisition and development company. He also serves as board chair of the National Center for American Indian Enterprise Development. Now, I've given you a brief description of them. They've obviously done quite a bit more in their careers, and I will ask them to embellish on that as we get into the questions. But before we get started, I'd like to give you a brief description of where Native American Bank is at currently. The bank is owned by its holding company, the Native American Bank Corporation, which is owned by 36 shareholders, 31 of whom are tribes, tribal corporations, or Alaska Native corporations, and they're spread throughout the country. We are the only national in-scope Native-owned bank in the entire country. The bank is a $185 million financial institution with locations in Denver and Browning, Montana. It is both a certified community development financial institution and a minority deposit institution, both of which are important designations. Our employee base is 41% Native, and our plans are to grow our entire base by 20% in the next 12 months, given the opportunities we see. And now for the questions. The first one is going to go to you, Cristina. And before I ask it, could you just give us a little bit more of your background and all the things that you've done in your career?
Yes, thank you, Tom. Swagwegu, Kwalangali, Nuyungyat, so Tahuni Niwage Deloda. My name is Danforth. I am currently the treasurer of the United Tribe of Wisconsin. Actually, it's the Oneida Nation. I've served 2 terms as the chairwoman for Oneida. I'm serving my 3rd term as treasurer. And as Tom said, I'm also the president of the FOA. I also have been with Native American Bank from its inception. And so I'm very happy and thrilled that we are here at our 20th anniversary. I was asked to come to a planning meeting for Native American Bank probably in 99, 2000. So I had ventured out to a meeting in Browning, Montana, and I came back and talked to my colleagues at Oneida and thought this was a wonderful opportunity for Indian country. Native American Bank was formed collectively through the vision of actually Senator Inouye and Eloise Cobell, who I've had the great opportunity to know and be colleagues with and work on projects with. So they were part of the people who had a brainstorm to form a national bank. And so here we are now, 20 some years later, and the vision has come to fruition. And it's been an exciting journey. It's been a challenging journey. And it's been one of the hardest working groups and boards I've been on, to be honest, but all for good reason. We came together as a consortium of tribes to develop a banking institute. This is a federally chartered bank. It's a national bank. And we wanted to be able to serve Indian country and provide capital to underserved communities. And as many of you may be aware, a lot of our tribal communities and nations throughout the country are in remote, isolated areas. And so thankfully, the bank has reached out over the years to help these tribal nations progress, have access to capital, lending opportunities, and we've grown quite a bit. We've had a lot of people along the way to help us out. The Native American Bank was formed with 12 founding tribes, each who gave $1 million contribution. $1 million is a huge commitment. And back then it was even a huger commitment. It was prior to really gaming taking off. Gaming had just started. And so, you know, nowadays, for some tribes, that might not be so much of a sacrifice, but back in 2000, 2001, it was definitely a sacrifice. And we actually had a vision to start the bank with $30 million. And then we decided, you know, we wanted to get it going. We had 12 tribes that were willing to participate. So we went ahead with Grand Traverse, Arctic Slope, Blackfeet, Chippewa Cree, Eastern Shoshone, Oneida, of course, MHA, Mandan, Hidatsa, Arikara Nation, Mashantucket, Pequot, Mille Lacs, Navajo, Sea Alaska, and Ute Mountain Ute. Those are the 12 founding tribes that said, okay, we're in, here's our financial commitment. And with, of course, the support of Eloise Cabell, she very much promoted that we do an acquisition of Blackfeet National Bank. So at that time, Robin Kovash, an attorney, did the acquisition transaction for us from Blackfeet to Native American Bank. So our original branch is in Browning. And then we had a corporate office in Denver. And most recently, we opened up a new branch in Denver and acquired a building. So there's been a huge growth and opportunity throughout the years as to where we are today. Our original board members included Tex Hall from MHA, myself, John Cole from Grand Traverse, Lou Anderson from Mille Lacs, Leo Kennerly from Blackfeet, and we also had Byron Malat from Sea Alaska. We had Willie Noseep from East Shoshone, Kenny Reels from Mashantucket Pequot, Derrick Watchman from Navajo, and Selwyn White Skunk from Ute Mountain Ute. So here we are today with this fantastic opportunity in providing financial services for tribal communities throughout the country. So there's a brief overview.
Thank you, Tina. That's great. And that is exactly how we wanted to start, was the how and why of the bank was formed. And a related question, you know, Native American Bank is one of only 18 Native-owned banks in the country. And I've talked to many tribal leaders around the country who have expressed the need for access to financial services. So, you know, a question to you, Derrick, why, you know, what do you attribute to there being so few Native-owned banks when the need is so great?
Thanks, Tom, and good morning, everybody. Tina, Lance, Yate. I'm Derrick Watchman, and I'm also the vice chairman of the Native American Bank Corporation. And so, good question, Tom. And I think a lot of us struggle with that. And there's probably a few reasons that I can kind of attribute to, you know, opening access for capital to tribes. And so one of the big hindrances that I think is just the whole notion of the labeling of trust lands. And so as a former banker, that was always very, very troubling for the bank that I worked for. Trust lands, you know, can it be collateralized? You know, can we trust the Native American legal system and court system? And so, yes, we've been around 20 years, but even today, many of the financial institutions struggle with that. And so the answer then and the answer today is Native American tribes basically owning and being a part of the access to capital. The challenge these days is that it's a hefty price tag. I'm aware that there's a couple of tribes in California looking at creating a bank, and the price tag is roughly $50 million. And so, that's a considerable amount of capital. And so, but obviously there is an extreme need for capital on reservations. Just look at the very limited development and activities in Indian country. And so, to me, the answer is access to capital. And so, but it's not easy, as Tina talked about, 20 years ago, and you look at today, it's challenging because, if you want to get a federal charter, there's many hoops that you have to go over, or go under, and go around, and everything in between. And there's many requirements and obligations that you have to fulfill. And so, but there's 18, like I said, 18 or so tribes that have and do own financial institutions. And so, I think there's a lot of hope out there for tribes, to actually go and buy a bank or create a bank. And so, but it's needed. So, but that's kind of a very quick answer to your question. So thanks, Tom.
Sure. Lance, I know you've made investments through Ho-Chunk Inc. in a couple of different banks. And so rather than maybe seek to start a bank, you made those investments, but your thoughts on why there's so few Native-owned banks?
Well, I think, there's 18, but my real thought is, how the hell did we get 18? There's so many things stacked against us. The Native American Bank is sort of a special case. We looked at investing in Native American Bank when it first started. Well, we didn't have $1 million, so we weren't really serious about it. We did have $1 million, but you have to think about a lot of tribes' situation. If you have $1 million, where do you shoot it? And if you shoot it into a bank, banks are slow. They have to reinvest the money. They have to grow capital, and putting money into a bank to invest in a community that doesn't have any economics going really isn't a great idea for a lot of tribes. And so there's sort of a lack of knowledge about banking. There's sort of a fear about it. And when you're just hustling to get going, it really isn't a great investment choice, especially if there's no development. Part of the problem is the tribe is the only entity with the money, and the federal regulators prevent the tribes from borrowing from its own bank. And so it's a really difficult thing. At the time, I said I consider banking sort of a secondary or tertiary step in your economic development process. So a lot of tribes are focused on developing their economy. And then after that, then you can put money into the banking sector to see if you can get going. But once your economy's developed, other banks sort of step in anyway. It's not so hard anymore. And so I think that's why we stalled a little bit. The first tribes to do banking were wealthy tribes who had a little extra money from gaming. And I think that's a great solution. But most tribes now who are wealthy either don't understand the banking or are really not that interested in doing it. Something that's been good, that's actually good for the Native American Bank, because if you want to be part of a banking system, you can just invest. And it's a whole lot less riskier 20 years in than it is to start one from scratch. And we've done that twice with a local bank in the Sioux City area, and then also now with the Native American Bank. So I think that there really isn't any big need, I think, to take that risk. If you don't want to, you could just join with us. But if you're going to, get somebody who knows what they're doing. And I don't really see a whole lot of banks coming down the pike from other tribes in the future, though, just because of the nature of it.
Right. Well, Tina, you've been here, as you said, since the inception. And as a board member, over these last 20 years, what are you most proud of?
Well, I think what I'm most proud of is the fact that we've been able to bank Indian country. 90% of our lending has been in Indian country, and it has created jobs. It has created jobs, of course, in the local Denver area, but it's created jobs and job opportunities for people, Native people especially, to learn and to participate. We've had a lot of tribal people come and go from Native American Bank over the years. And, some of them are out there in Indian country doing great things in other financial realms. And, Shannon Ward, she, was at the bank and she left. She went to the BIA lending and then she came back to NAB and has done a fantastic job for us. So creating jobs and job opportunities. I think another thing that I'm very proud of is the fact that we have a new branch in Denver, alongside with our Browning branch, who we are very stellar in their community from a financial services standpoint. And again, we are a major employer back in Browning as well. And I've always been an advocate to hire Native people in any arena, because I've always said if we're not going to hire our own people, who will? Because otherwise we're out there competing in a great macro economy. And so again, I'm very proud of the fact that we've been able to do lending and create jobs and mentor people along the way. So that's my short list.
Great, great. We'll make it longer too.
Okay.
All right. So Derrick, given the history of the bank, the last 20 years, being there when it started, what do you think was the bank's largest obstacle to overcome?
Well, Tina did a good history of the startup, and back then I was actually the chief of staff for the Navajo Nation president, former and late Kelsey Begay. And so the effort actually started from our Navajo Economic Development Department, but having a little bit of background in banking, President Kelsey Begay said, well, maybe you should take over. And so I joined the board and was able to shore up $1 million. And so I think one of the biggest challenges that I saw then, and maybe today, is the concept of buy native, use our own services. And so, it's very convenient to go across the street to the big guys, Wells Fargo, B of A, but to make a concerted effort to say, we're going to support our own. And that's a big challenge. I run through that as a chairman of the board for the National Center for American Indian Enterprise Development. And that is, how do we buy native and buy local? And so I think out of the blocks, out of the starting blocks, we had a hard time convincing tribes, because a bank offers a couple of things. One, capital, which I think tribes are very, very interested, but also depository services and other financial services. At that time, we also put together an investment management group. And so, but because we're undercapitalized and small, I think some of our tribes, even my tribe, was a little bit reluctant, to put money as a deposit into a DDA, and then also look at the investment services. And so, but I think we've come a long way. And so the experience that we have on the table now does say that, Native American Bank has been here 20 years and offers a complete array of services. And so, but I think we've gotten past that. And so, but, it was challenging. The other challenge I think back then was, and Tina can attest to this, one of the early principles was that we're going to loan exclusively on Indian land. And that became a big challenge just because, how do you underwrite the credit? How do you figure out how to, collateralize trust land, and to what extent do you rely on the tribal court system? I think we had some challenges. We had to have our own legal counsel work through that. And so, but we've gone from in my opinion, from what I see, a tribal-based bank to a community bank. And so what that means is that we bank on reservations, but off. Because we have, if you look at Native America in our members, half of us live on reservations and the other half live off. And so to exclusively look at tribal lands, I think that was probably the challenge. So now, the testament is we have, for example, a branch in Denver now. And so we've branched, and I think that's really helped to improve, sales and basically growth. And so, we've gone from 15 million to now 170 million in our balance sheet. So that obviously is a testament to our fortitude, the testament to the board members, and saying we got to stick to our guns and continue to provide a financial service provider for any country. So
Great.
thanks.
Thanks, Derrick. Lance, when you became associated with the bank, the bank had been through some ups and downs, some troubles. We were under a formal agreement with our regulator. What kind of what's been done to ensure that we don't revisit that and we move forward?
I think, well, for the people listening here, we looked at investing back when it first started. We've always done loans with the bank, but we didn't have the money to invest really, and I wasn't sure how it would do. And I didn't have $1 million to gamble. I probably wouldn't have been here if that would have been the case. And but Ho-Chunk got a little bigger, and we had a great year in 2015. And so I think we invested $3 million into the bank, and it was at a pretty critical time. The bank had trouble during the Great Recession. It had depleted some of its capital. It had taken on some loans that were outside of any country. They had loan participations, and a lot of things went bad during that time. And we didn't have the capital base to really come back from that pretty easily. And so it was kind of, when you get smaller as a bank, it can be sort of a death spiral. And when Ho-Chunk made its investment, we restructured some of the stock and a few other things, and we gave it the chance to do well. And I've always said over and over in our board meetings, they're sick of it. I said, we do the hardest things possible. We picked the hardest possible customer base, rural, tribal, trust land, all kinds of problems. And so what's interesting is, so we have the most aggressive banking business model in the country. And we go to the toughest places where no one else will. But within the context of that, we have to be ultra conservative too with who we lend money to. So it's really we have sort of a contradictory thing. We're aggressive, but we got to be smart with what we do. And we utilize the BIA loan program, and that helps. That allows us to do bigger loans. It allows us to protect ourselves a little bit on the downside if something were to go wrong. We also have we've done well enough that more people are putting capital into the bank. And so we can get big enough so that you can weather a little bit of a storm. And then we've changed our offices a little bit. We've mentioned a couple of times our office in Denver. We can now do loans. Every loan doesn't have to be the hardest imaginable. We're right downtown Denver, and there's a lot of Native American companies there who we could do business with. And the other thing that's really been interesting is who we are has been very helpful, I think. People have sort of, what's the phrase that everyone hates, woke? They woke up. I think it's out of date, but people have woke up and they started thinking to themselves, maybe we should help the Indians, right? Develop capital in other minority banks. I think Black-owned bank, Hispanic banks, Native American banks, they're all receiving capital to various levels to help stimulate the economy of those groups, because I think people realize that if you're going to develop those groups, the people best capable of doing it are people who understand that segment of the population better. And so we're perfectly positioned to benefit from that. So I think it's going to mean more strength, more capital, more loans across a broader spectrum of Native America, not just the reservations.
Well stated. Tina, given all of that, any lessons learned that come to mind over these last 20 years?
Yeah, I think one of the things we've learned is that we have to balance raising capital, liquidity, lending limits, deposits. All of that is a balancing act for us. And, we want more people to contribute and make deposits. We have to always watch, that we're being fair. Like Lance said, we want to jump in and help the bank, but there's limitations as owners of the bank. And, I think too, is we all thought that gaming was going to be our answer to the bank, but it hasn't been because of the size of the bank, our legal lending limits based on our capital, based on our liquidity. So I think one of the challenges continues to be is how do you drive more business and grow within those regulatory limitations? Even at Oneida, we have Bay Bank here, which is a community bank. But when we started Bay Bank prior to Native American Bank, for 5 years, we couldn't, there were some covenants and restrictions. And so after 5 years, we were able to buy out the rest of the shares from the people who invested in Bay Bank. So we have that same type of dilemma. We have some restrictions, some covenants that we always have to be leery of, and as far as that, you can't really have any conflicts of interest in lending and how the bank is run. So there's a lot of things that we learned. Managing growth is what we've learned mostly, and we will continue to take on that challenge as we pursue our annual goals. It's exciting that we're profitable, that we're growing, that we're meeting our annual goals, and we're very careful about them as well, because again, we don't want to create a situation where we're gonna bite off more than we chew. When we started the bank, that's exactly what happened. We were very ambitious, and then we're like, okay, we need to pare back because we can't do all of these things. And so we did have to pare back. We actually wanted to do some trust management, but we couldn't do that either because we didn't have the staff. So that's the other thing, is as you grow, you have to create positions for the bank that can manage the growth and provide the service. So that's all a part of the balance that we see as a challenge, but it's a good challenge for us.
Great, thank you, thank you. So speaking of some of that growth and what's going on, and this is for any of the three of you, what are some of the recent investments, say in technology, that the board has supported that have really allowed Native American Bank to compete? Derrick, any thoughts?
Well, yeah, well, cybercrime and, the internet is obviously, an area that you have to be very, very mindful of. And so I know we've invested a lot of funding to improve our capabilities so that we're not hacked, we're not dealing with ransomware. And so that's obviously an increase in requirement, but we've invested in state-of-the-art banking system technologies, and so that basically is a tribute to keeping our eye on the ball. And so kind of going back to what Tina was saying, I think we're a business just like anybody else, and so we have to demonstrate our competency, we have to demonstrate our growth, and we have to demonstrate that we're a good provider and a good partner. And so with just one facet of that is just technology and cybersecurity, and we've done a good job. And so, with you and our technology team, we have state-of-the-art systems in place. And so, rest assured for those tribes out there that are looking for another bank to partner with, Native American Bank is here, to be one of your banks. And so, great technology at the bank.
I would echo the technology comment. We've invested in another bank in 2000, and the Federal Reserves are the most boring regulators in history. They sort of come in and they're like, everyone's monotone. It's just terrible, and it's kind of like I went to a fancy law school, and you basically get a B+ if you don't screw up, but it's hard to get an A+, right? And in banking, that bank has never got a 1 in anything until just this last year I think it had some COVID money come in and it got a 1 in earnings, but it's been a 2 for 20 years straight in every category. I think it might've dropped a little bit during the recession, but the Native American Bank got a 1, which is the highest you can get in technology. And so we've had to sort of figure out how to do that from scratch. If we're going to be a bank that's going to be headquartered in Denver, but service all these tribes in all these places, we better have our act together when it comes to the technology side. And we're just scratching the surface of what that can do. Like what I want to do is use some of that technology to open up services and maybe not full-blown branches because that's expensive and difficult, but services in some of the tribal communities who are ready for it. And so we think of technology as our way to sort of bypass, some of the normal infrastructure that you have to put into play. If you go to like a continent like Africa, there's no telephone poles, right? With wires, they just went wireless. They just skipped it all. And I think that we have to sort of skip that infrastructure that the big banks have and use our technology to leverage our skill sets and really bring stuff to Indian country that's not there.
Thank you, Lance. So what are, looking out the next 3 to 5 years, the bank does a rolling 3-year strategic plan. What are some of the things the board and management are preparing for over these next 3 to 5 years? Tina, any thoughts?
Sure, one of our most recent ventures that we want to look into is cannabis banking. And, Denver is in a state, of course, where it's legal to use cannabis. There's a lot of industry opportunity. So the bank and the bank board and staff have been providing training for our staff and for the directors so that when we get ready to go into that realm, we are very secure in what we're doing. We're knowledgeable in what we're doing, and it is a great growth opportunity for us. And there's a large need. Like I said, Colorado has allowed the consumption and use and purchase and retailing of cannabis products. So we're going to venture down that road. We're going to continue to improve our technology. When we bought the new branch in Denver, it was an opportunity to build upon our infrastructure of the bank and to increase our security. We've ventured with the Jack Henry program. We developed a new website, and all of those things are going to help us with our new venture as well. There are other opportunities, but again, we have to make sure that we plan out our growth. And so that is one of the things we're looking at right now. We're always looking to help consumers. I think that the COVID lending opportunity was also something that helped us as far as the PPP loans. And so we gained some new customers and good relationships through that, because some of our customers, business customers, their own banks wouldn't help them. But our staff took it upon themselves to educate themselves to understand what that whole process is about. And because of that, we now have some new business clients that we will serve in different capacities. And so we're just trying to be as progressive as we can as we move forward. And again, sticking with our strategy, growing that allows new opportunities. But again, that whole push and pull of having the right people in place at the bank. So we are going to be hiring on some new staff as well to help us with those ventures.
Exactly. And I'll just, for the audience, we did almost 250 PPP loans over the course of 2 years, and nearly 80% of them were to non-customers. So you're absolutely right. People were not getting help from their local bank. Getting a little more granular, just looking ahead of 1 year out, when you look at what's happening, there is a lot of federal stimulus money, even for minority deposit institutions. Looking at that, the plans for the bank in the short term from the board's perspective, can you elaborate on those a little bit, Derrick or Lance?
I have a comment, and then Derrick, I'm sure Derrick could too, but I think that, when you're in banking, the goal is it used to be to make about 1% on your asset base. If you have $100 million in assets, you want to make $1 million. And we have we've been able to build it up from, I think it was about 60 million where we were at, to maybe pushing 200 million in assets in a relatively short period of time. So we're doing well. And with the Trump tax cut, you want to make about 1.2%. And our other bank has about $500 million in assets, and they make about $5 or $6 million this year. So right at 1.2%. But the Native American bank is going to make 3 or 4% on its asset base, right? Because we've been able to figure out ways to cleverly utilize the situation we're in. So, when the sun's shining, you've got to make some money. And that's what we've been doing. And what's great about that is, in banking, in order to grow, you have to reinvest your capital. And so that's been our limitation. We had a lot of capital, we lost some, we put some back in, we've had people sort of dip a little bit more in, but the better we do, the more promise we show, the more success we can show, the more likely it's going to build on itself, because we'll have more capital, do loans, more people will want to invest. And then it's already a snowball rolling down the hill. right? And so over the next year or two, I think we can turn this into an avalanche of success. You know, in Indian country's a rising tide right now, but we've got to be positioned and have enough capital to benefit from that at scale. And the more capital we get, either injected into the bank or that we make ourselves, the more impact we can make. And the fact that we're punching way above our weight, you know, and we're one of the most profitable banks around this year based on assets and profits. And so it's really an interesting and amazing story. And I'm really proud to be a part of it. I like to brag to my other bank, which is a total non-Indian bank, about how much we're making this year. And they don't even believe it, you know, they think I'm lying.
Well, you know, to add to that, you know, what Lance is saying, and Tina, you know, we're growing, we got the capital. As time goes on in the next 3 to 5 years, you know, one of the things that we're growing is just knowledge of each reservation, each setting. And so, you know, you got basically 574 different tribes, 300 different reservations, and it takes time to underwrite. And so the more that we do with our staff, the more we're acquainted with each of those tribes, so it's not starting all over. And so, you know, as a former banker, one of the challenges was just understanding, you know, each tribal government system, the court systems, understanding the laws. And so as we build our base and as we increase the staffing, we have that all under our belts. And so when a new credit opportunity is brought before us, we understand, you know, how each tribe works. And so that improves and speeds up the underwriting process. And so I know a lot of times folks get frustrated, you know, because underwriting takes so long. We have a pipeline. You know, as a former banker, my tribal pipeline was probably, you know, twice as long as maybe, or the time to get done is twice as long as maybe something off reservation. And my feedback was, well, you know, I got to understand as a banker, you know, each system so that we can get it done, because, you know, we're federally regulated and we have a federal license, so we're obligated, you know, before, you know, relative to the OCC laws and Treasury, we have to follow the underwriting process. So the more we do, the better information we have, the quicker, you know, we can run through and give decisions. So that's what I think is going to happen to us with the increased capital and improvement of our human resource talent. So, you know, I look forward to, you know, some bigger growth in the next 3 to 5 years, as you mentioned, Tom.
Great, thank you, Derrick. And Tina, from your perspective, because you get to look across the spectrum of time that you've been involved with the bank, and looking forward, what are you most excited about?
Wow, that's a good question. You know, I think what I'm most excited about is the fact that we've made it through some challenges. We've made it through some growing pains. We've been able to expand some services. We've become profitable. We're continuing to work on our goals as a board of directors. But I think what I also see on the horizon is our young people stepping up and taking on more challenges as the bank grows. We have some relatively young staff people at the bank, and I think with their collective energy and the knowledge of some of us that have been around for the duration of the bank, I might be the only one left, but I've always really taken to heart the whole mission of Native American Bank, and I'm really proud of the fact that we're providing financial services, job creation, because there is so much in the financial industry that young, especially Native people, can go into, but young people in general, there's so much opportunity. And, you know, even, you know, my involvement with the FOA has really shed a lot of light on that. And so, you know, I'm proud of the fact that Native American Bank is standing strong today, and that we're a part of a great vision that we've undertaken 20 years ago, and really proud that I can even be here for the duration of 20 years and see people come and go, but see where we're at today is very satisfying. So thank you. Thank you, everybody, for what you do for Native American Bank.
That's great. That's great reflection. Overall, are there other things, other ways you think Native American Bank can be helping Indian country through maybe additional departments we might add, different kinds of lending focus perhaps. Trust services was mentioned before as we continue to grow. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
Well, there's still the big housing need and there's so much need for home loans on reservations. If somehow we can figure out how to understand the whole process, I think there's a big opportunity for home loans on reservation lands. And, that's always been the challenge. I know here on Navajo, every year is a big cry for needs, housing needs. And so if we can understand, the trust process and how BI works, that could be obviously a big area. I know Tina mentioned cannabis, and there's certainly a big need for that. And so, one of the things that I think maybe that I have some thoughts on, that's, trust services. A lot of tribes have miners trust programs. And so, how do we get creative so that we put together long-term savings accounts for, we talk about the 7 generations. And so are there some products that we can put out there that's creative, and it helps our young ones create a capital base, but at the same time we give them some training so that when they have access to the capital, they use it in a good way. And so and then how do we provide and this has always been a tough one, financial literacy. It's hard to do that across the reservation, but there's still a big need for that. And so by doing that, it gets to what Tina's saying, and that's, getting our young natives interested in financial services. And so, it's not just a bank. You have credit card services, you have merchant banking services, you have investment management, there's all kinds of opportunities that we could provide to our native young. And so I think we're at the cusp of that. And so it's just, obviously more discussion, more conversation, but like you and what your team are doing, Tom, getting out there to all the conferences and meeting outlets to basically tell our story. And we've been at it quite a bit. And so the more we do, I think the better returns we'll have.
Great, thank you. Lance?
Yeah, I think that I certainly agree with what Derrick and Cristina said, but I think the trust department is big. What people don't understand about banks, I think, is they think all we do is lend money, but a bank is a bunch of little businesses, with the lending being the biggest. So if we did a mortgage department, well, that's another business, and it's a harder business. Then there's but you can make extra money. Then there's the trust department. At the other bank we have a trust department, and it grows. And you get a little slice of the investment pool that's in that. If someone has $1 billion in there, you might get a little slice of that. And so the better they do, the more you do. But we don't really have that. And so I travel around. I'm a lawyer, and I work with other tribes. And there's always somebody, and they look like they're from LA or something, or New York, and they're wearing a nice suit, and they're really, all they're doing is buying the same stock as everybody else is buying, but they sort of look the part, or they went to the right school, and then they take a big piece of the money, right? They're from a big fancy company of some sort, Merrill Lynch or something, who knows? And then they put the money in their pocket, right? If we could figure out how to get a trusted department going and say, let us manage the money and we'll buy the exact same stuff they bought, and then we won't put the money in our pocket. We'll take the money and we'll put it back into Pine Ridge. We'll put it back into Standing Rock. We'll put it back into, rural Arizona. And so I think that then the cycle will continue to go. And so I think that we can basically perform the same services, but we can also do a better, it's more of a good deed, and we're more mission driven than, Goldman Sachs or Merrill Lynch or Bank of America or Wells Fargo. And so but we've got to get over this sort of perception that somehow natives can't do it, and that somehow non-Indians know everything about this kind of thing. And so I think, to me, that will be the next step, is we'll get the bank to scale, and we'll start doing these other business things to really be successful. But we've got to get people to go past their own sort of mental blocks about what natives can do and what you need non-Indians for. And I think that's the next step that we're in. And young people that are coming up the pike, I think will be able to fill a lot of those jobs and those roles. And the last thing I'd want to say about this is that when I look at I haven't been because of COVID for a while, but the last time I was out in Denver, we had a meeting in our new office, and I love seeing all the young Native people working there. They look the part, they talk the part, and they're out there getting it done. And so that's one of the best things about the Native American Bank. Maybe those people wouldn't have those positions they're not going to have them at Wells Fargo or Bank of America. They won't even get the interview. Right. And so we have this perpetual sort of opportunity machine. And I started this law firm a couple of years ago, and I think we have 19 lawyers, and 14 or 15 of them are now native. Right. And I remember one of the ones we hired, this was at my old firm, they said, "What are her grades like?" I said, "I don't know. She's got a law degree, a master's degree, and a college degree, and she's from Wounded Knee, South Dakota. She's going to get it done no matter what." Right. Mm-hmm. And so that's what the bank is on a personal level. Like that young lady got a job and now she's a star, right? But she wouldn't have got that job in another context, right? And so what the bank does is we look at people from what they're going to be, not where they came from, not who they are at that moment. And those opportunities that we're giving these young people is something that I'm super, super proud of. And the bigger we can get, the more opportunities we can get. So I just think that I really love the fact that the Native American Bank is not just doing the right things, but we're getting the right people too.
Great. I think we're going to end it there. And we're going to turn it back over to Veronica. I think, Veronica, there are some questions.
That is correct. Our first question is, how do tribes invest in a Native-owned bank? And a follow-up question to that is, does NAB accept additional tribes to join as investors?
Well,
Yes.
I guess, go ahead, Tom.
Me too. Yeah, we very much welcome the opportunity to get more investors in Native American Bank. If you put your money where your mouth is and you want to help tribal communities, this is the best opportunity to do so. But you also get the opportunity to participate, as a shareholder to discuss what our options are as far as our goals going forward. And we welcome new investors. We have from time to time put out a PPM, private placement memorandum, which people can, or tribes can, their money into Native American Bank. So yeah, we welcome any opportunity. And if you want to invest, get a hold of Tom. I'm sure his information will be on the website. So thank you for that question. I don't know, Tom, might want to elaborate.
I think you did it. I think you did it just fine. There's that opportunity from time to time. Next question, Veronica.
How important are loan guarantee programs to the current loan mix? How do you foresee this evolving in the future?
I'll answer. The BI loan guarantee program is absolutely critical. How many 55 million acres of tribal land is in trust, and you can't leverage it use it as collateral. So it's a super big problem. So you have to use the BI loan guarantee program. The problem you have is that there's a cap on how much you can do annually on that. So we utilize that program, but it's only going to get us so far. The bank could possibly expand into SBA, small business loans, and those kind of things with guarantees to help leverage it up. Or we can do things that don't require some of the loans, some of those. And I think as tribal entities grow and as Native entrepreneurship develops, we'll be able to develop along with that. But right now, those loan programs are absolutely critical to what's going on.
Next question, Veronica.
The next question is, recent studies indicate there's a high percentage of natives who are unbanked. How can we close this gap by using digital tools?
I think Native people being unbanked continues to do in Indian country. But again, it starts with education. The need to have a bank account, the need to have a credit card, the need to provide consumer lending. But all of that goes with the opportunity for people to learn how to use wealth, use credit, become credit worthy. It all goes back to an education process. But Derrick, did you want to say something as well?
Yeah, I struggle with the word unbanked. Here on Navajo, we have, different banking systems. We have, unfortunately, pawn shops. And so, that is a form of financial services. And so, but I agree with Tina, we have to figure out how to provide education to say, okay, you can get a better process by not, pawning your vehicle or pawning your jewelry. That seems to be, or the payday loans. And so if you can improve your overall ability to get credit, I think that will help. And so, but I do see a lot of our native vendors moving into internet technology. You go to the conferences, or we have a lot of flea markets here on Navajo. A lot of them have basically a handheld system where they can take your credit card. And so that whole process is growing. And so to me, that's an opportunity for a Native American bank to get into, some type of venture, maybe with the credit card processor. So I think, Lance mentioned some of the countries, they don't have landlines. And so, internet broadband, hopefully it takes effect. We have, more services out to any country. But I think that's going to be the future for Native American Bank, is how do we help many of our native traditional vendors. And so right now we have a big economy in Indian country. It's just not formal. I'll just use the word formal. And so how do we tap into that? And so internet technology, I think, will be one of our vehicles to get into that. But to get there, some training, and I see a lot of local entities work on that front. So, I'm excited about that, especially for our young Indian entrepreneurs. I know here on Navajo, we have a lot of coffee shops that are in the startup phase. And so they're very excited to get into commerce. And so we have to be there to help them manage and be their bank of choice. And so it gets back to being, a great financial partner. And so sometimes, people forget that, a bank just doesn't lend money, but a bank is here, especially the team, to offer, insight on, how to deal with credit, how to open up a DDA, or, what does, points mean, things like that. So that's why we're here. We need to be, and then we're improving our ability to be a financial partner. So with more staff and more outreach, that's happening.
So I'd like to add, when I was a kid, I'd go with my grandmother to get money orders, and then we'd go down and we'd pay the power bill. She didn't have a checking account. It was cash and everything. When I started Ho Chunk Inc., the tribe gave us the grocery store, which was not a gift. It was losing quite a bit of money, but we were the bank on every other Friday for the whole town, because we'd have to have huge amounts of cash there and go 3 times a day to get cash, because we were the bank. No one had it, and I think it's sort of a legacy of poverty, the lack of banking, the lack of trust, not feeling, and racism really, and not feeling welcome in that environment. It's like you don't want to be the one getting watched when you walk into Walmart, right? And so by the security guard, but that's what it always felt like. But as we grew economically and jobs in both the tribe and Ho Chunk, we started, pushing people towards direct deposit. And we made an investment in a bank. And I said, assume every Indian who walks in the door is the tribal chairman's nephew, right? And you'll be okay, right? And so now we have a place where we can feel comfortable, that because we own an interest in it and welcome. And that's led, then we started pushing 401ks and all these other things. And it's slowly gravitated to the point where we have a banking relationship. But I do think that we have a chance, if we can figure out how to turn it into a banking on the phone, then we can get all the young Native people in it. Some people aren't going to change. My kids make fun of me for driving to the bank on Saturday to deposit a check, because they could just do it on their phone. But I like doing it because I go to Starbucks and get some coffee, So it's just kind of like something I do, and I've done for 20 years, and it's part of my routine, but they wouldn't dream of doing something like that. And so we have a chance to shortcut all of Indian country using some of the technology platforms that we're developing, and that's pretty exciting.
I'll just add that the board has supported our investment in that type of technology on the website. as Tina mentioned, on our banking mobile app. And then we've invested in ITMs, which the technology will be that we can put them remotely, and you can have a video chat with someone in a call center. We're not there yet, but that is some of the technology that we can use in some of the more remote places where branching just is not practical. So Veronica, the next question.
This question is directly for Lance. They said, Lance, I love hearing mission driven. How do you reconcile a predator growth economy with a mission driven financial institution? We are seeking low return investments as one way to personally reconcile it. Any more suggestions?
I'm not sure what they mean by the predator economy. I mean, I don't know, maybe that's the internet lending or the payday loans or something, I don't know. But I think in general, everyone's out for themselves to make as much money as possible. I mean, you know, we do business all over the world. It is a predator prey situation, and you better show up. I teach my interns, you know, I said second place in business is usually last, right? And so you've got to be aggressive. But Ho Chunk Inc. has two faces. Off reservation, we're killers, right? But in our community, we're a little bit different. We want to build some more houses. We don't care. You know, maybe we don't make any profit on it. That's all right. We don't have to make money off grandmother's house, right? And so as a tribal entity, you have a different mindset. We're not looking to beat Wells Fargo at their game or Bank of America at their game. We just have to be the best. Ho Chunk Inc. just has to be the best tribal company, and the Native American Bank just has to be the best Native American bank. And so I think that if you look at the makeup of the company and the makeup of the board, we automatically are going to do things that we think are right and good for Indian country, because we all have a seat at the table and we're setting the policy and we're setting the strategy. The natives are. And so I think that we don't really have to overthink it, because we wouldn't do it if it was going to hurt Native people.
Great, thank you. And this might be the last question, and it is, how are tribes banking cannabis/marijuana today, especially in terms of tribal versus federal regulation?
Anybody have any thoughts on that?
Well, I've been pushing us to do more of that anyway, but I'm always getting in trouble, right? And so you have to understand, banks are so regulated. They're maybe the most regulated entities in the country, and maybe in the world even. And so it's really hard to go out on a limb. And the feds have done a funny thing. They said, we won't prosecute it, and then so it's up to the states. So in Colorado, you can buy marijuana, but the feds they took a cowardly sort of approach to it. They said, we won't do anything about it, but they have all these rules where it's still illegal. And so, you know, the regulators don't know quite what to do. They know it's a nod and a wink that no one's going to do anything about it, but it's on the books that they can't do anything about it. And so they're never going to tell you, yes, don't worry about it. And so you have to find ways to navigate that. And I've pushed for being aggressive, but we're not some giant bank that can, you know, fight for all of Indian country. And so we're trying to find that balance. But I think we've taken the steps to enter into that market, and why not? You know, it's actually a lot safer than those people carrying around just cash. And so I think that everybody needs services, and we're trying to find a way to do it.
Well, it's almost like gaming. You know, gaming 20 years had the same challenges. You know, where's the money coming from? And so banks were reluctant to touch Indian country. And so cannabis has fallen that same line. And so the more we do, you know, I agree with Lance, you know, the better we'll get. And so I think, you know, at least we opened the door, and we as a board are looking at that. And so, you know, hats off to all of us, you know, for considering that, because there is an opportunity, and it's a safer way to conduct commerce out there, especially for tribes. You know, we don't want them to be exposed and, you know, put themselves in harm's way. And so we're offering, actually, you know, not only banking them, but offering them a safe way to manage and control their funds. So that's important.
Right. And, you know, tribes have their own regulation, but tribes are not in a situation where they can create their own regulation around anything that's a Schedule 1A or cannabis. So the tribes still have to have a relationship with their financial institution. So there are some tribes out there that have cannabis industries and cannabis stores, and but they have a relationship with their financial institute. So as Lance and Derrick were both saying, the two most regulated industries are gaming and banking. And so the feds and the states need to step up to help us collectively address how we're going to bank the cannabis industry. And we want to do it in the safest way possible. We want our businesses to have safe retail and manufacturing and growth opportunities and have the same consideration around being banked. That's a true unbanked need. And so, we want to move forward as progressively as possible, but do it securely as well.
All right, I think that's going to wrap it up for us. I want to thank you, Cristina, Derrick, and Lance for your time today. It's not easy getting the three of you together, but we did it. So thank you very much.
Hey, Tom, can I make a suggestion? When we get that cannabis banking going, let's do a tie-dye t-shirt with the American Bank logo on it. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you to our panelists, moderator, and everyone in attendance today. We hope you enjoyed this event.